and thank you for joining me for and perhaps a slightly different session. Really, I'm asking the question: is there a one world conspiracy? And I'm framing it in terms of what about your daily life? What about your everyday life? And you hear lots of sort of conspiracy ideas knocking around, especially with the internet. And I wanted to sort of ask a few questions really about things like one world government. We hear quite a lot about that, and I'd frame it really with an organisation that doesn't. There's no conspiracy here. It's very, very plain, actually, what they want to do. There's an organisation based in Switzerland called the World Economic Forum. It's chaired by a man called Klaus Schwab, and he is chairman of this organisation, or chair of this organisation. And I suppose I would ask some key questions because they have an annual meeting in Davos where the great and the good of many, many different countries are invited. And I suppose he has quite a lot of influence. And it's not a conspiracy, because if you go to the World Economic Forum website, you will see what they aim to do. And one of his famous statements that he's now taken down, which he became infamous for, was that you will own nothing and you will be happy. But I suppose I'm asking some key questions about Klaus Schwab. Is he elected? Who elects him? Where does he get his power from? Tony Benn, the old Labour MP, used to ask these sort of questions. Is he elected? If so, by whom? How can he be voted out? Well, he's not voted in, so he can't be voted out. What does he actually want? Well, I'm going to ask you to go to the World Economic Forum website and look at what they want. Is what they want what you and I want? So I'm posing some questions here for you, just for you to go away and to think about. So you have organizations like the World Economic Forum. You also have the United Nations as well. Under that umbrella is the World Health Organization. Then you have large international bodies like China and its Chinese Communist Party, who, if the data and the intelligence coming out of China is to be believed, the lab leaked virus was indeed lab leaked, and it was based on some military work that the Chinese Communist Party, their military wing, had been doing, and they developed this hybrid virus called COVID. Now, we don't know that for sure, but the consensus of opinion is that it is lab leaked, and we believe it was accidental leaking of this virus was responsible for what followed in 2020, and we believe the virus existed well before 2020 as well. And then there's other things that people in this field talk about: big tech, big pharma. What is their role? Is there a conspiracy? Well, possibly not. It's actually more plain, in plain sight, hiding in plain sight, if you like. It's plainly stated on the World Economic Forum website what they actually want. So there is a move toward global governments generally, and people would argue that we live in a very interconnected world, and that it is logical that we have the erosion of sovereign states and more a move towards this global governance model. So who are the sort of folk who want it? Well, I've already mentioned those folk: the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, China possibly, often left-leaning folk, Greens, socialists. They want more government, they want more legislation as a general rule. And of course, this has knock-on implications for things like food. We've seen the Dutch farmers, for instance, farming manipulation, dictating diet. So the whole food in Holland is very, very efficient. Food in Canada, food production in Canada and Holland is very, very efficient. Why is it being mucked around with? What are the farmers being pressured to do? And I know in Holland, many of the farmers are very angry, as they are in Canada and places who have very efficient farming methodologies. What about health? One of the questions that is being raised now is the whole COVID and the reaction to COVID crisis that we saw in 2020 and 2021. Is there going to be another lockdown? And many people have said that that's unacceptable and that it should have been dealt with in a softer way, in a more measured and a rational way, as it was in, for example, Sweden. And then we have the whole area of currency and money. Digital currency is being talked about very, very commonly now. And cash is slowly being squeezed out for various reasons. And there's also a popular kickback to actually say, let's keep cash, let's not get rid of it. We need to have cash. And then that leads on to more of a surveillance society. Are we moving into a more Orwellian type of surveillance society? And then there are freedoms. Do we want to live in this globalist governmental state? What about our freedoms to travel? What about our freedoms to express and to hold diverse views? What about people of faith who hold a faith view? Why shouldn't they hold traditional faith views? And then there's the whole issue of the climate crisis. And I put inverted commas around the climate crisis because if you've seen some of my other videos, you will know that I question the whole climate crisis industry. And then from that, you have the idea of control. A frightened populace is a compliant populace. Fear can be used as a method of social control. And we saw that with the lockdown. And so it is with climate. And you get folk who are literalists like Greta Thunberg, maybe through her autism, is taking the idea that the world has only a few years to exist quite literally. And some of the climate scientists who refute other scientists, and science should never be a settled thing. There should always be debate and open debate. They're kicking back and saying no, that the world is running out of oil. It's polluting, massively. We've got to control this. We've got to put legislation in. We've got to pay more and more taxes. And I think you need to question that. Why is the UK government, for example, committed to net zero? What does net zero actually mean? And what is this green, very radical agenda that we apparently have all signed up to? What will this mean for your money? What will this mean for your freedom? What will it mean for your future? What will it mean for your family? And I hope today what I've done is I've just raised some issues. I've raised some questions. I think we have to be very, very careful when we talk about conspiracies. But equally, when we look at an organization, an entity like the World Economic Forum, there is no conspiracy because it's out in the open. It's hiding in plain sight. I think there are directions of travel. Some people would say that there is a one world government around the corner. Some people talk about this new world order and so on and so forth. There seem to be certain key little catchphrases like building back better and so on and so forth. But I've posed the questions here for you. Neil Oliver, who is a commentator on this, and Richard Vobes, Vobes, they talk a lot about this. I'm raising questions. Is there a one world conspiracy? What about you? How will it affect you? And I think you need to start asking, as well as myself, need to sort of say, well, how will it affect me? How will it affect my family? How will it affect my earnings? How will it affect our nation? And we live in Britain, and we have voted, for example, to not be part of the EU and its ever closer union. And we voted for sovereignty, and we voted for taking back control, which perhaps arguably we have never really moved into in the first place. But that's another debate for another time. I'm asking you questions. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your input. Give me a thumbs up if you like the questions I'm asking, and do feel free to make any comments in the comment section. And thank you again so much. Thank you for those people who subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. It's very rough and ready. It's very basic. And thank you. I appreciate your time listening to it. Have a good afternoon and evening.